Welcome, everyone, to the Holstein House podcast. I'm the West Virginia woman, Robin, of RobinHolstein.com and Holstein House, where my guests get a great night's sleep at a fair rate plus breakfast. This is a podcast that looks at society and culture issues affecting families in West Virginia and the United States, from food preparation and storage, gardening, home repairs, current events, and more. We'll go around the table and back in 60 minutes or less. So let's hang out and talk a while. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Holstein House broadcast. Today, I have Mr. JV Hilliard, epic and dark fantasy author of the Warminster Series. His biograph goes Born of Steel and Fire and Black Wind. J.V. Hilliard was raised as a highlander in the foothills of a once great mountain chain on the confluence of the three mighty rivers that forged his realm's wealth and power for generations. Hilliard's training and education readied him to lift a quill that would scribe the tale of the realm of Warminster, filled with brave knights, harrowing adventures, and legendary struggles. He lives in the city of silver cups, hypocloids, I may not have pronounced that right, and golden triangles with his wife and Ranger of the Diamond. They built their castle not far into the countryside, guarded by his own two horse hounds, Thor and MacLeod, and resides there to this day. May I call you Joe?
Yes, you may. If you call me JV, I'm not going to turn around to you anyway. But if you call me Joe, I'll listen.
Well, JV is what you've got on all of the things there. So
we fantasy adventure authors have a tendency to do that. So my publisher asked me if I want to, J.R.R. Tolkien, J.K. Rowling's, R.A. Salvatore, George R.R. Martin. So, Joe's a pretty common name, but JV isn't. So they used my initials, and I said, fine.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So this is honestly, as we were talking before, this bio is really kind of a mouthful. How in the world did you come up with this for your biography?
Well, there's a two-part answer to this. The first is everybody's bio is the same. This is where I went to school. This is who I'm married to. This is what my kids do. This is where I live and how I write. Right. And I was challenged once by a radio show host who wanted to, anybody that wanted to get onto the show had to prove their value by sending something in creative that would catch their attention. And so I decided in the 2,000 words that I had available to me or whatever it was to cast myself as a character within the realm of Warminster. And Warminster, for those that read fantasy adventure, is my realm. It's kind of like Tolkien's Middle Earth or Martin's Westeros or Shannara for Terry Brooks. It's the realm of Warminster, right? So I cast myself as the chronicler of the realm, and what I did was I masked my true bio behind things that read sort of like a fantasy novel. So when I said the three rivers, that clearly meant Pittsburgh, or when I said that I was in the mountains, that's the Appalachian Mountains. And the hypocycloids, if you're a Steeler fan, those are the diamonds, the funky looking diamonds that are on there.
Is that what those are?
They're called hypocycloids.
I like the Steelers, but I'm not obviously enough of a fan to know that's
So I threw that out because if you know what a hypocycloid is, or if you Google it, you'll see it and you'll be like, oh, that looks like the Steeler symbol. He must mean Pittsburgh. And the silver cups is for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They've won 5 of them. And I just and my wife is a former ranger of the diamond, which is someone who roves the baseball diamond.
See, I was thinking jewelry, but that's me.
Well, no, she's an athlete, so I cast her as part of that. And my dogs obviously are my horse hounds. So MacLeod and Thor. I've got a Siberian Husky and I've got a Red Fox Lab Retriever that they're best buds.
I bet. And being up there this time of the year because as we record this, it's January 2024. We just had some snow. I'm sure they're cuddle buddies too, trying
Yeah,
to stay
well,
warm in
they
this.
sit outside all day long, and
Well,
the
except the
lad will
husky,
go out.
yeah,
Yeah, he'll go outside, and they just love playing in the snow.
yeah.
For us, it makes it a lot easier. When the snow comes, they're outside having fun, and it's all good.
Well, I promised you some time. I do want you to talk a little bit about are you calling it a trilogy? I
It's a quadrilogy. It's actually a 4-book
oh,
series.
what is it?
The series comes out in February or March of this year,
Okay,
2024,
okay,
and it'll wind up the Warminster saga, at least
okay.
part one of it. And that 4-book series is poised to launch yet another trilogy beyond that, sort of as a follow up to some of the characters who make it through the first 4 novels and what happens to their story down the road. And then in the interim, while I'm writing the second trilogy, I have, especially for 2024, I have 2 or 3 books planned to release that are origin stories of some of my more popular characters, and so they're
Mhm.
going to be more novella size, a little bit less epic fantasy and more classic fantasy, where you're learning the background and the stories of some of your favorite characters or those characters that you love to hate.
Well, give me a little bit about like the inside flap of each of the books to share with
Yeah,
everybody,
yeah,
so that these because my listeners and the folks that are going to watch the videos possibly will be familiar with, but aren't generally in the science fiction fantasy uh, area.
yeah. So it's really simple, and many folks will identify the genre as Dungeons and Dragons or Dragonlance or
Hmm.
The Witcher, or the Tolkien stuff from Middle Earth. If you like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or The Hobbit, that's the genre in which this is written. Now, epic fantasy denotes that it's really something that has a future, a past, and a present.
Hmm.
And as an author of epic fantasy novels, you have to create that kind of history so that people understand that something that's going on in the present was affected by something that happened in the past with the hope for a future.
Hmm.
And you see that a lot in Star Wars, right? Like, and that's
Yes. Yeah.
that's a space opera, but it's
Hmm.
not much different where you've got a 9 or a 10 installment series with spin-offs from that. And the goal there is to do the same thing. It's like, hey, we pick up where Luke starts, and Luke doesn't know what's going on. But if you look backward, there is the Clone Wars, and
Hmm.
Darth Vader used to be Anakin Skywalker, and that's the
Hmm.
father, and all that kind of stuff. And then forward looking, and so the same thing happens in my genre. Now, the difference with my books and what you would typically find in classical fantasy is that I put a little bit of a spin to them. They're a little darker. They're a little bit more gothic. They're kind of like maybe Tolkien meets Dracula a little bit without the vampires,
Oh.
but it's that kind of like darkness where the good guys don't always win.
Hmm.
And so maybe it's a little bit more like a Game of Thrones, where some of your favorite characters don't survive because that's what happens in real life. So there's a element of realism that goes into a gigantic fantastical story, and I think that allows people to suspend disbelief and frankly, hopefully, like the characters more.
Well, it does sound fascinating. Now you touched on Dracula. There was a series of books and that I used to love to read by Chelsea Quinn Yarborough. On it was a vampire historical fiction series, and I loved those. I still have them. I don't. They're packed away, and since one of the moves, but um, that was one of my favorites. And then I was never much about reading any of those Star Wars, but of course I was a teenager when those original movies hit the theaters, and I'm a Han shot first person. I'm not much on the I'm not much on the remakes and updates and all that stuff. And but I can certainly appreciate, and of course the token books. I can appreciate that type of writing. It's not one that I've spent a lot of time in. I personally tend to be more nonfiction than fiction. But um, tell me a little bit about just uh, your background outside of being an author? When did you decide, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to create this series?
Yeah. So prior to this, for about 20 years, I was a defense lobbyist. And you want to talk about
Ooh.
nonfiction? I
Yeah,
wrote nonfiction every day, right? So
yeah.
and so I represented in primarily a lot of technology companies that needed access to the Pentagon, to Congress, to the White House, and
Mhm,
my job there was to put them in front of program managers that could either buy their product or help them develop their product. And
mhm,
so it was a lot of government subsidies and grants, and also protecting the warfighter, uh, or it could be things like energy or healthcare that were
mhm.
related to that. But as we all experienced a few years ago, I mean, COVID happened,
Sure.
and there was a big pause, and DC shut down for about a year and a half. And as a result, a lot of my stuff became virtual. And in the beginning, there was nothing to do. And if you would ask my wife, I am too much of a busybody to tolerate me in the house 24/7, 365 during a COVID crisis. She said, just go do something. Just
Yeah.
don't go, just go do something. So I tucked myself into the den. And one of the things on the bucket list was I wanted to write, a fantasy novel. And so, yeah, as a longtime, lifelong nerd, I hearkened back to some of the stories I had participated in as part of my Dungeons and Dragons days, and looked at some of the half stories I had written while I was in college and in high school, and resurrected them and turned them into what I thought was going to be a standalone, one-shot fiction novel.
Mhm.
And when I shared that with an associate professor friend of mine who liked it, she said, "Look, this is good, but you need to learn a little bit more about pacing, and you need to learn to write dialogue a little bit
Mhm.
better. But the story's good, the bones are there, and you just need this. You need to find yourself an editor that can help you, that edits your stuff." And
Mhm.
that's really where that came from. So I had all this downtime, and what I thought was going to be just a one shot book that I got it out of my system, was done, turned into the back nine of my career. Like I fell in love with writing. There's no pressure.
Mhm.
The pressure is meeting deadlines, but I was used to
Yeah.
meeting deadlines, and those deadlines were very pressure oriented. Where this is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I miss it by a day, are you gonna, the world doesn't end. I'm not. No one's
Mhm.
dying, because I lost something here. So it really turned into something that I didn't expect, and it's been a lot of fun. And it's hard to make money as an author. Not
Mhm.
everybody's Stephen King, so you have to look at it as you're starting your own business, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you kind of roll out and say, look, in the beginning, I'm not going to make money till book 3. I'm not going to make money till book 4, but I'm going to get there.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden you create your own following, and then you can kind of transition away from what you're doing on a day-to-day job, and move into a full-time authorship role. And not everybody gets there. Not everybody wants to. Some people just do it as a side hustle.
Yeah.
I've decided to really double down and make this part of the back nine of my career. And in doing that, that means I get to hit the road and go to conventions and book signings, and speak at different places and stuff, and have a lot of fun. But it's dramatically different than what I did in the first nine holes of my career, which was all sorts of pressure and all sorts of government and all the things that people uh, find in their day jobs. I mean, this is something that I really enjoy doing, and hope to stick with it.
Now, was this your first, the first book in the series? Was it your first publication, or
Yeah, I mean,
just your?
technically, I have a lot of non-fiction stuff published based on, copy I've written for websites, or speeches I've written for folks, or grants that I've written for people, or policy pages that have become law, and things like that I've done in my professional career. But this is the first fiction-based thing that was really that I had done since I was really in high school or college. When I was in high school, I was a nerd, right? I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was watching all the
Mhm.
movies, having a good time. And, I tried to write, but you don't know what you're doing, and things like that. And it's a little hard. And thankfully I had an uncle who was, a mentor to me. Now, unfortunately, he was paralyzed in the war.
Mm.
And as a result, he was like a second father, and there was very few things he could do. And one of them that he could do was he could write. So
Mhm.
the VA fashioned for him an implement that allowed him to work on an old-fashioned typewriter with a pencil, basically, and
Ooh.
typing his stuff. And he wrote pulp fiction and short stories
Yeah.
that were published in old school hard copy magazines. And a lot of it was horror or dystopian fantasy kind of stuff. And I just fell in love with that. And if he was going to do it, I was going to do it. So I wanted to be a writer, and I found out I was pretty good at it. But, when you have a chance to, go to college and you want to chase something down, I mean, authorship is a tough way to go. There's not a lot of money in it, and there's a chance that you're not going to make it.
Right.
But for me, I always knew I'd return to it. It was always a first love, but it was always something that I had to kind of get out of the way. I had to live my career first, get that out of the way, and then return to this as sort of a job that I could eventually retire into. And that's what I'm hoping to build over the next 25 years.
Oh, it sounds like you've got to definitely have a plan down for that. We kind of touched a little bit before we started recording that I don't have the discipline for it, and it sounds to me like you very much do. So, did you now? You did mention that with the epic fiction that you need a beginning, middle, and end. But did you plan it in your mind? Did you have planned the multiple volumes that you would have a fourth book in the series? Or did you think, okay, one, maybe two, I'll get out of this, and then, oh wait, I still have another one in here somewhere?
Well, it's funny because I had just planned it as a standalone. I was going to write a book and say I had done it. And then when it got published, my publisher encouraged me, and rightfully so. And I didn't notice this being outside the industry, but once she mentioned it, I noticed it a lot, almost to the point where you couldn't not notice it, which is in my genre, almost all writing, almost all is done in series, because you spend so much time in fantasy or sci-fi building a world that your fans don't want to leave it. They want to live in it. Right. And so you see everybody writes 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 novels, some of them 40 novels, in the realm that they've created, because it takes so much time to do that. And so a standalone doesn't work in fantasy adventure. It rarely works. So like, even if you look at some of the young adult stuff with Harry Potter, I mean, Harry Potter, it's a 7-book series, right? And even though you could have lived with the first one, at the end of the day, it was better because it was a series. So in order for me to become published, she said, I'll do this, but it has to be a trilogy. And then based on the success of the first book and the second book, that we turned that third book in the trilogy into 2 books. And so my plan was it was to have a standalone that became a trilogy, then it became a quadrilogy. So, it was never the plan, but we made it work. And, it's a matter of, just being a little bit disciplined in going back and addressing things. And thankfully, I'm a big planner. So for me, like I have a hard time. There are folks out there, Stephen King's the most popular among them. They're called pantsers, where they can write by the seat of their pants, right? They just start to write and, and they see where it goes. And
my
those
life is seat of the pants.
Right. Yeah. So like the pantsers in my realm have a tendency to burn out, or like they have a good idea and they're halfway through the story and they don't know how it ends and they get writer's block, or the ending isn't what it's supposed to be. Planners or plotters like me can't write. Like if you said, here's 3 words, go and write and come back in half an hour, I'm stuck. I have to know where I'm going, and I have to have a direction for me to be an effective writer. I just don't sit down and start writing. It doesn't ever happen. So for me, I planned out what I thought was going to be a 600 and something page epic fantasy novel 1, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, wait a minute, this is 3 and then 4, so let's break this up. And because I had planned it, it was easy for me to go back and say, okay, well, I can add this scene, I can add this story arc, I can add this plot arc that I wouldn't have had, or this character arc that I can now develop farther than I would have, because I have more time to do it. And I think that's really where people have, fallen in love with this series. It's because there's a lot of detail in there, and you can get into the eyes of the characters. And I do multi-point of view books, which is popular in my genre, not popular in all. Usually you got a single view, where you have that character and that main character, where here you're following 4 main characters, one of which is the villain. and then a handful of lesser characters that's better to see through their eyes at certain points than it is through others, because it gives the reader insight somewhere. And some people like that, some people don't, but it's popular in my genre to have that. So that's why I write that way.
Well, and then I wanted to ask. Now you've mentioned several times Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. Now the focus on the Nordic and Viking myths and legends, is that because of your fondness for the Dungeons and Dragons and those type of things, or is there a little something related to your ancestry that caused you to want to choose those?
Well, it's a bit of both, right? So when you create your own world, you want to take stuff that is familiar to people, because it can't just be something that you've made up. Like it has to be based in some level of reality. So what I've done is I went around the world and found popular myths that were exciting, that people enjoyed, but also found twists in them that maybe people didn't see coming or didn't know about that story, because everybody knows about Thor and Loki, but they don't know about the antlered man. And the antlered man didn't exist in Nordic mythology. That was called the Master of the Hunt. And so what I did was I took the Master of the Hunt, twisted it into basically an evil version of itself, and made it one of the villains in the novel. Or I have a Native American myth that was called skinwalkers, and these were kind of ghost-like creatures that Native Americans believed in. But I turned mine into a skin stealer, which was more like a doppelganger, this shapeshifter, which is popular whether you like the werewolf stuff or the vampire stuff. Anybody that's going to shapeshift, this is a way for me to do it, but have my own personal spin to it, so it aligns well with the unique nature of my realm. And so I was able to borrow some of that stuff. But Viking and Nordic cultures are very popular. A lot of TV shows drive in that direction, as is cowboys, as are vampires and things like that. And I just chose a couple of things that people are familiar with to embed them in there. And Viking culture, especially when you're talking about an adoptive, middle ages, medieval kind of culture, really fits nicely into the kind of stuff we're doing with the realm. So, for me, it was just one of many cultures that appear within the realm of Warminster, but one that's really important to the first four novels, as it sets the stage for some of the gods that I've created that are likened to a Valhalla, or some of the other gods I've created that are gods of war and things like that. And that goes back Greek, Roman, you name it, everybody's had them. And that way I was borrowing from something that's real, so people can feel that familiarity, and then just made it something that was my own. And they're like, oh, I get, this is cool, it fits. And that's where some of those ideas came from. And I've done that with religion throughout. I've done that with the currency throughout, and stuff like that. It's strange to say it that way, but like, when you're watching Star Wars or Star Trek, what do they use for the currency? Credits. Well, what's a credit? I don't know. But if I have something else, like in my realm, I just called it something different. So instead of a gold piece or give me gold, I was asking them for a golden palmet or a silver laurel or a copper sheaf. And those were names that were familiar enough to those that are coin collectors that they get it. They're like, oh, that's cool. But I wasn't using the standard credit that comes with sci-fi, or the standard gold piece that comes with Dungeons and Dragons or Tolkien-esque kind of stuff. It's something that adds its own sort of twist to it. I think readers like that kind of stuff.
So you said that you're a plotter, as opposed to a seat of the pantser, or a pantser, I think you said. Where do you see publishing? And I guess let me ask it this way. AI is the elephant in the room for a lot of things. Do you see, and have you looked into the potential for AI to make significant changes in the way just average people write and publish?
Well, it already has, right? So, the publishing industry is archaic in many respects. And for 100 or 200 years, it was run the same way. And then Amazon came in and disrupted that marketplace by allowing folks to self-publish. Now, some self-publishers don't have the discipline to find an editor and beta readers and really put something together that's quality. Sometimes it's just they're out there and they don't care if they sell 50 copies or 500 copies. They're there because it's an art form for them, or it's an outlet, it's a hobby for them, and it might not be the cleanest product. And so where a traditional published house would never look at that. That's not what they're looking for, because they want to sell tens of thousands, if not millions of books. That's how they make their money. So they double down on authors that are going to they're going to sell them books, right? That's how they make their dollars. When Amazon came into the marketplace, now all of a sudden you see so many books bought on Amazon. Many of them are by successful independent authors that do that. Now, in my case, I found sort of a nice Goldilocks between the two. I found a small niche publisher in Dragon Moon Press, and just, I'm sure you can tell by the name what they publish. They publish my kind of stuff, but it was small enough that I have a lot of control over my product, not just the publication of it, but the publicity of it, as well as, the direction I'm taking it, as opposed to being dictated. This is what you're going to write. We're going to buy your story, and then we're going to run it and put it in all these bookstores. Now, that happens as part of what I'm doing, but Amazon really changed that marketplace for lots of people, and I think for the better. AI, on the other hand, is, that sword cuts both ways, right? So you've got a tool that can help you, especially if you're a first-time author or you need to do something quickly, and I'll get back to that in a second, or you're a plagiarist, right? You basically have gone out and had this thing scrape through other people's work to put things together that you've stolen from them, that might be unrecognizable because you're now adding it to your own plot in some way. But now they have AI devices that can detect AI writing. It goes back and it sort of like unwinds it and reverse engineers it and finds out where the first AI stole it from. Because let's keep in mind, AI it doesn't know what it's writing. It's just is finding similar things that you say you want it to write and pulling these things together, and then you're smoothing it out. And so in many respects, authors and artists look at AI as cheating, right? It's a form of plagiarism and theft. And so, most stay away from it. However, the real value to it comes in research. And then also in our day and age, there's something called rapid release, which people that read today don't have the tolerance to wait forever. This is a generation of, elder millennials back to Gen Alphas that everything is on demand, right? They can go on and Netflix and binge watch something. Our phones, any information I get, there's no discipline. I just Google it and I have the answer to it. I didn't have to go to a library and look at it. I mean, there's no patience for it. And so when you find something that you want to watch or read, you want it right now. And so it's forced a lot of publishers and authors to write faster, which means in some cases they need the assistance of an AI to write the bulk of it. And then they go in and, like I said before, smooth it out and make sure it comports to what the storylines are. And so it's a blessing and a curse. The curse is you're really stealing from something else. And you could even go in, like I have R.A. Salvatore, he and I had a conversation about a year ago, maybe 8 months ago, where he said that he used it and said, write me a story in the language that R.A. Salvatore would write it, just to see what would come back, right? And it was basically stealing his own stuff. And the AI was able to do that for him, which I thought was pretty interesting concept, just to kind of test it and use it. But, fans don't want to wait around for the next release in 3 months or 6 months. They want something right away. So you're publishing something every month, and sometimes quality hurts and quantity wins as a result of that. And so it's a tool, and like many tools, it can be used both ways, for good and evil. In this case, I think it's just gonna get better, and it's not going to go anywhere. People are going to use it, and they are using it right now to follow along that rapid release, because that's what people want. And that's the worst thing that could happen to you as an author. You don't follow up with something, and then people lose interest in you because they wanted more. And I find that out on the road. Like, in all honesty, when you're at a convention and you have a book, people won't buy it. They'll say, "Oh, that's interesting," but I'm going to buy it when you have the whole series, and that way they can read the whole thing at the same time. Or they won't buy the first until they know there's a second or a third or a fourth, and then they'll come back and buy the first two, and then the third, and that way. It's just a way people read and a way people consume, and so AI can both be a blessing and a curse.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. I've not written anything with AI other than maybe a social media post clip for, write a text for a social media post of a white boxer out in the snow, kind of to put up on Instagram or something. So I don't fool with it much, but um, I'm going to stop there because I told you we'd be about 30 minutes, and I do appreciate your time, and I want you to tell folks where to find your book. I'll have it actually in the comments and the notes of the broadcast, but go ahead and share where folks can get your book.
Sure. And first of all, thank you very much for letting me come on. This has been the fastest 30 minutes, I think, in recorded history. This went by really quickly, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm
Oh,
really easy to
anytime.
find. jvhilliard.com takes you to my
Mhm.
website. Dragon Moon Press is my publisher. You can find all my works there. And if you want to find me on social media or ask me a question, I try to get back to everybody within 24 hours. My handle on Instagram, TikTok, trying to think of what else is that. Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, Discord, wherever. Twitter is at JV Hilliard Books. So if you just at JV Hilliard book me, you'll be able to direct message me, or you can email me on my website, or just joe at jvhilliard.com, and I'll try to respond to you, no matter how crazy your question is, or, some people just want to beat you over the head with some stuff and tell you what they like and not like, but I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show.
Oh, anytime, and I hope to have you back after your next book is out there and published.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. So there you have it. Post your comments, do all that boosting, liking, sharing, thumbs up, and stuff that helps spread the word and poke the algorithms. Follow me on most of the big social media platforms and look for my name, Robin Holstein, or Holstein House. Till next time, bye-bye.